We got the beep.
We got the beep. All right.
Welcome back to it, ladies and gentlemen, people of all ages and circus tents.
Circus tents. Nice.
Getting
You're
into
bringing it back, by the way.
circuses.
Yeah, Barnum and Bailey Circus is coming back.
They totally. Well, they never really went away. They just
they
stopped
did.
using elephants.
No, they went away for a while.
Like 2 years.
They had to program themselves, I guess. Rebrand. There we go. That's the word I want. Rebrand, reprogrammed. Depending on what country you're in, it goes either way.
I quote Eddie Izzard, who thought this was a great idea. Let's bring a bunch of animals and have them slowly trudge around in a circle to creepy calliope music, and people will pay for the privilege to watch this.
Yeah, well, as historians, we know the reason why. So
yeah. Well, that's the thing. Actually, that ties in. Once again.
Look at that! I'm so great. I did a segue and didn't even realize it. So awesome I am.
According to your musical taste, you're old enough to need a segue. So
I don't think I got the balance for it.
no one does. Nobody wants to admit it, except the tour guides. The tour guides are the only people that can actually utilize a segue properly. So, getting into the weeds versus thematic teaching. It's another one in our series of we couldn't agree on what to talk about historically, so we're going to talk about teaching. Which step one, if you're thinking about becoming a teacher, do something else.
Yeah. What
Literally anything else. What is your damage?
What is wrong with you?
Show me on the teddy bear where life hurt you. Like there's no reason that you should be coming into teaching, unless you are literally unsuited for any other job like us. I you're gonna love this. I'm a history major, right?
Yeah.
With a an English and undeclared sociology minor. There is no part of me that is going to make anything above $40,000. Like if you just like I was the fact that I'm here is
English minor in
English parentheses film studies.
Film studies.
Film studies.
Yeah, a lot of people watch film studies in college too.
I don't know. My professor, Dr. Cooper, was devil.
Wow, that escalated quickly. I thought he was going to start kissing up to a professor.
No, that man.
Let me guess. He's done left this earth.
I don't know if a man like that can actually leave this earth, or he just gets recalled back to his satanic prison.
Yeah, I'm guessing he's dead.
But he taught me all about Hollywood comedies, and I adore those movies now because of his class.
Oh, so backhanded compliment?
Was Dr. Cooper? Was Dr.
You better got it right, or you just insulted the wrong prof.
No, the other Dr. I had two Dr. Coopers, I think. One Dr. Cooper taught me American history, and it's the reason I don't care anymore. And another Dr. Cooper.
So basically, you hate everybody named Cooper.
No.
Explains your hatred of Big Bang Theory and Sheldon Cooper.
No, I hate Big Bang Theory.
No, I called it.
For the fact
Didn't even know it, and I got it right.
That's cultural appropriation. They took my nerd culture.
Nerd culture.
And they make fun of it. Look how dorky we are. Look, man, I'm a fully functioning member of society, except, of course, for the aforementioned historical stuff.
Yeah.
Where's Mr. Smith? I need Smith because he's the only one that keeps us on track. Anyway, getting into the weeds versus thematic teaching.
Kind of what we just did here.
Yeah. So let's define our terms as per Usual. Getting into the weeds is where you focus on individual stories and extraordinarily detailed details. There's a
detail.
A detailed detail.
Cool.
Specific details of any historical period, which is like taking a microscope to any time period or any lesson you're doing and focusing too much on that. Thematic teaching, well, that's your department. You do it.
It's where you carry themes throughout eras of history. You understand the relevance of the eras more than all the cute little win the bar bet story details.
See, I love when he does that kind of sing-songy BBC voice where it's like, it's the thing where you do it and it's so much better than yours, Scherzer, because yours is done in a different tone of voice. So
yours gets off track and behind sometimes.
Oh, but you can get caught up in thematic teaching as well, and
you can if you're not good at it.
Miss the trees for the forest. So, if you will. So I guess in this one,
well, I did go to forest, so maybe that's part of it.
There's a lot that does that. So let's see here. Do we want to like state our cases for them and then try to find some kind of
No,
compromise?
because we no. Let's just do it
Want to do
with
something crazy and like
just do what we
defend
always
each other's
do.
defend each other's side?
No,
You defend getting into the weeds and I'll defend thematic teaching and it'll be fun.
yeah, whatever.
You're like role reversal?
No,
Weird. Anyway, it's not what your music profile says.
each has its place, right?
And it really is a blending of the two that shows you to be a really it's how you blend the two that makes you a more effective teacher.
I think so. You got to be able to do both, especially in an academic setting where you have these parameters you're supposed to be teaching within anyways, because you have, if you're teaching a class that has a standardized test at the end of it,
Oh God, yes.
if you're teaching a class that has a national test at the end of it, right?
Yeah.
If you're in a state or a locality that has um, objectives that's supposed to be taught, specific things that
Common
need
Core.
to be taught. Common Core around the country here here in Texas, we have
The
the
teaks.
TEKS, right? And different other states have those. So you got to be able to balance that. And if you get caught up with just teaching what it says in the objective sheet, right, then you're not really doing the history any justice, yourself any justice, and you're definitely not giving the kids any justice on actually learning and retaining the information.
Because the teaks and like the things like that, the state standards and the
Standards, that's
national
the word I was
standards,
looking for.
the state standards and the national standards are very much a thematic teaching focus because they are basically like, look, you're going to have 5 minutes to talk about this era of history. You're going to have like 3 days. And if you can do something in 3 days, that means you've taken out a lot of the story and a lot of the detail, a lot of the connections. So in our defense, I don't even know why I'm getting all defensive, but in our defense, it is very much an idea of economy. How do we keep ourselves moving?
Economy of time,
The
right?
economy of time, which is the one thing we're not getting any more of. So, but here's the problem though. Like with that, we've unfortunately created a system where getting through covering the material, quote unquote, covering the material has become paramount and
Teaching the material,
teaching the material.
teaching and understanding the material.
And like you said, if you miss the small stories, the good like specific stories, you can lose a lot of kids.
Yes.
But then again, if you focus too much on the stories, they're just going to be a bunch of disjointed facts. Let's use our common student as an example. What shall we call him?
Common student.
All right. So student, column, common. Common student is one of those students that he needs the stories.
Need some stories, right?
He needs some stories. The only way I got when he was my common student, keeping him interested was all about finding that one story per day that could hook him into the idea. But the problem was if I did too many, he would start Rubik's cubing those single
And
stories.
he's trying to put him into
He's trying to create the thematic teaching, but the theme that goes through it, but it's too specific. It's too focused in. I have unfortunately not given him enough of the big picture. What's your experience with that student, that common student?
Kind of just the opposite. I big picture a lot of things.
Mhm.
I connect things up throughout the links of history, how it impacted this or was impacted by that. And he kind of wants a story or two or three, right? Or eight in things that interest him too, which may or may not play into what the overall theme is of what we're trying to get to at the end. Because I kind of approach teaching history kind of like it's like a fence post, right? You have your eras, right? So you have you have your era, and then you have your wire that connects all the posts together. And
So this is
in
a
it,
barbed wire fence?
it's a barbed wire fence, and then
Yeesh.
every once there's a barb, right? And that barb is a fact, but each of those wires are a theme
And you
throughout
can
history
trace them
that
along.
you could trace them. And every once in a while, the theme gets a hole in it, just like a hole in a fence, right? Just like somebody cut the fence and the theme's not there for that unit or for that era, right? Because if you put too many barbs on it, it gets discombobulated and you can't put it together.
Yeah.
Right? If there's too many barbs on a barbed wire fence, you can't put it together.
It doesn't have any. It doesn't have enough tensile strength to keep itself up.
right? And you're gonna keep ripping yourself at the barbs as you're trying to build it to begin with. You get bogged down into trying to put it all together because you want to get all these facts in there and all these stories in there, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes stories are great.
Oh,
Stories are fun
absolutely.
to tell. Stories get some kids interested and get them hooked, and other times you just keep telling and you keep telling and you keep telling, and they can't put them all together.
Or they just fall flat because the story doesn't make any connection. There's
Yeah.
no connection to their main life. Especially with like further back, the further back you go in world history, it's harder to make things fully stick. You have to find those more generic, more morality stories.
Yeah.
But then you get the problem there with the morality of the people, the story you're telling, versus the morality of the people who are listening. And the
Oh,
story,
that whole
yeah, the
getting
whole,
caught up into your own mindset thinking and trying to apply it to history.
yeah, Mr. Scherzer, that's not right. Well, it was to them. I mean, you and I have in our arguments, we'll sometimes flip over who's doing thematic and who's doing the connections and who's doing deep dive stories. Because unfortunately, a deep dive story isn't the whole picture. For example, abolitionism.
Yeah.
Abolitionism is one of those things that you and I talk about all the time, especially when I was trying to, and the key emphasis on the words trying to teach U.S. history AP was trying to figure out the significance of abolitionists and the significance of the abolitionist movement at the beginning. Because if I tell stories, I've got these wonderful stories of these abolitionist movement leaders, Eugene Debs, all these different, not Eugene, Du Bois. Du Bois?
No, Frederick Douglass.
Frederick Douglass. This is why I don't taste this anymore. Uh, but not just Frederick Douglass, but like all these other
Dubois?
people.
Is he French now?
Is it Du Bois or is it Du Bois?
It's Du Bois. It's W.B. Du Bois. Du Bois. You can actually go in on the Google and actually hear him pronounce his name. It's W.E.B. Du Bois.
Du Bois. Okay. He's the man.
Hey, look who's walked in.
Speaking of the man,
Talking about Du Bois?
No, we're talking about getting into the weeds versus thematic teaching. Did you not read your text message earlier today, sir?
Nope, I'm sorry. I'm a busy individual, sir.
that's what happens when you get responsibility.
Yeah,
No, I like the theme though.
You
Yeah.
can't piss
I like
around
the
like we
picture.
do.
I really like the picture as well.
The picture's beautiful. So, all right.
Scherzer's yard.
No, it's not.
No, it's
Yeah,
not
it's
because
his yard from this past spring.
no, it's not Scherzer's yard because there's living grass. So there's living anything on my yard. So we've kind of covered the basics and we've just been kind of circling the eddies.
Yeah.
What do you think is more important to really focus on in your experience? Because of the three of us, I think we kind of agreed, and he even complimented, so that he's not going to admit to this. We said that of all of us, you seem to have the best grasp of how to combine getting into the weeds versus thematic teaching. You found that nice blend that we're still working on in both of our ways. How do you find the perfect mix?
Just for the record, they never compliment me, so
So
that
glad
took
that
that one to heart.
1,000 years from now, when they
Hey.
dig up this podcast, is one of the few things they're going to get from this time
Yes.
period.
First of all, he believed the bullcrap that you just said about us saying nice things about
No,
us.
y'all said it. It's on recording, I'm sure.
No,
Probably is.
I'm
no,
sure it's on
no.
recording.
We said it at lunch.
Anyways, ask the question again. Rephrase me, sorry. 'Cause
How do you balance your stories and your themes together? Because you're kind of the blender of the group, right?
Mhm.
Scherzer likes to get into the weeds.
I am the mixer.
I am very thematic in
He's
my approach.
he's
Yeah.
the angry like garlic press, and you.
So the way I've always approached it, because I do, I like.
agreed with that, by the way.
Let the man talk.
I do like the idea of the whole scope thematic teaching because that is typically how I introduce lessons. That is what I maintain this kind of cyclical pattern throughout at least whenever I was teaching world history. World history, it's a cyclical pattern. We talked last week about I use the dynastic cycle.
Yeah.
And I use that again and again and again when we talk about revolutions, when we talk about all these other things. And so that's the big theme. I continue to have this big, heavy scope, big approach. And then within that actual content or that lesson, that course, whatever it is, I point out the little bullet points and the details within there. Like, okay, here's the big idea. it goes into writing, right? Here's the evidence for this idea of point 1, point 2, point 3. Sum it all back together, and then you kind of reverse engineer it. So now you say, okay, now how do all of these ideas or topics relate back to this big theme? Why are they a part of this big theme?
So then where do you choose to put stories? Like, it sounds more strategic than how do you determine the best time to pull in an exemplifying story?
The best time to pull in an exemplifying story, that's a good question. It kind of comes and goes from it comes and goes for me. So I mean, if I'm in the middle, I just teach that big lesson concept, right? The big idea. I introduce the thing, and then I'm introducing maybe a main event. So let's talk about revolutions like we did last week, right? I talk, okay, this is what happens in a revolution. This is the big idea. And then I have a subpoint. Here's the subheading. Okay, the American Revolution. And then you get into the specific stories of the American Revolution that would show you, okay, these are the processes of a revolution. This is what a revolution looks like because this happened, and this happened. Yeah. So if you're looking at it from like a notes perspective, I do it a lot how I do my notes, right? You have the title as your big picture. Yeah. Maybe the first thing under that title is, okay, this is the big idea. This is what's going to. And then under that is your subheadings. So you have your main subheading there. This is point 1 or example 1 of revolutions. And then here are the individual little details about that revolution. Okay, you have the American Revolution. Now let's go into why is this revolution? Okay, well, this happened, right? The king is not listening to the rights, so the people are upset. And so you just go from there. You break it into smaller chunks as you get into the theme, but you have to be able to tie it back into that big picture at the end.
I get that. And that's the best way to like keep them coming back and keep them learning about it. But I love me my deep stories. Let's look at Alexander the Great. When you and I taught world history together,
just before you know it, here comes a story.
I don't know. Is there a way to like verbally communicate rolling of the eyes? But a roll.
Please tell
anyway, so when I teach Alexander the Great, I love to have the whole story of Alexander the Great. We talk about his conquest, we talk about all that stuff, and I ask the questions at the end of how does this pattern continue, or I start to talk about things that kind of show the pattern, but I love that story. I love his childhood, I love his education, I love his conquest, I love the story of his death. And the problem was when you guys did it, you used maps and you do all this stuff and you kind of kept it, Eins by dry. This is how it happened. But whereas your kids got the answers right on the test, my kids really internalized it. But unfortunately, my kids didn't do so hot on the test.
Yeah, and so I guess getting to that point, right, is yeah, you have to remember too that at least what I always like to remember is that they're not all interested in those little small details. Yeah. And so whenever you get into that, you start to lose them. They disengage and they get on their phones, what have you, games on the computer, anything like that. But right, how? How? We blocked everything. No, not really.
Class.
And so that's where I always had to find my balance is, okay, am I starting to lose some people? How are we doing over here? So for a lot of my really in-depth stuff, I typically would answer I would say whenever kids asked questions, right? Like, well, how come there's no heir for Alexander the Great? Who was his heir? Oh, well, then we can get into the fun little question of, well, was he possibly gay? What happened? Did he not have kids? Things like that. But again, that was based on a question. So a kid asked a question, okay, I can get into a little bit more nitty gritty because you're engaged with it and you're interested to know. But my biggest thing was always making sure, do you have the main concept, main idea? If you want more information, come talk to me or you'll get it through worksheets, what have you.
Okay, so then Shanetti,
how much do y'all think that getting into the weeds and stuff is just kind of a way to kind of either show off our knowledge, right, to demonstrate how much we know, and we all like to do it, right, occasionally. Some teachers, some professors do it a lot more than others. And how much is it to
why did you look at me when you said
enhance the story? Because we're sitting across from each other.
Yeah, that's the reason.
And we're supposed to look at each other.
Literally turned more towards me.
Because every time I look at our live studio audience, I start cracking up because of the eye rolls and looks from a live studio audience.
So I'm going to say this. I think I am very guilty of doing that a lot, especially at the beginning. pontification, but I found that. Thank you, live studio audience. I will remember that. But what I think has happened in the past, especially when I was working for the last district spring, I think one of the big things that did was it gave them the understanding that I would, if I didn't know the answer, I would find the answer. And it's kind of like that initial salesmanship. I know this. Trust me, I know this.
Do we have to build? It goes to the question: is do we have? Why do we have to build that trust? What's in the point where did we lose that context when we walked into a room? We knew that the person in front knew more than us.
I'm going to argue when we had when the development of other outside sources, these kids can hop on their phones or their computers and very quickly find four different differing opinions, which is repetitive, I know, sorry. Four differing opinions on the same subject we're talking about.
And all of them probably wrong.
So, and then my question to that would be, okay, well, what gives them the certification to speak on those things?
That's the problem. It's the plebiscization.
I saw it in a movie. That's always my favorite. It's always my favorite. Coach, I saw this in a movie.
Right.
Or I read this one book that wasn't even published or peer reviewed, and that's what it said, and I liked what it said. Therefore, I mean, we see it all the time in the news. We see it all the time.
Let's take everybody's favorite Hamilton, right? Let's take the book that got turned into a play.
Okay, real quick, did we all read Ron Chernow's Alexander Hamilton?
I didn't read it. I watched it.
That's fair. Did you read it?
Yes, I read. I own it.
I'm sorry, I listened.
Oh no, audiobook.
I own it. I own a copy of the book before it has the cute little now starring on Broadway sticker that's on, right?
So get rid of my dust covers. Is that bad? I'm not a fan of dust covers. I think they're useless.
Depends on how nice.
Mint in box.
It depends on how nice the book
but it's
looks.
It's a dust cover.
Okay, hey, hold on. We're getting into the
Depends on the first edition. You definitely need the dust cover.
It only depends on how good the hardcover looks. Okay.
It wasn't very good. It was just a picture of Alexander Hamilton looking all smug. So we read the book. You've listened to the book, which is basically the same thing as
no. He listened to the play.
The musical.
He saw the play where the author of the book said it was okay that they changed the history for the play. We're not.
I am familiar with that part of it. Yeah.
We're not talking the casting and the casting choices and things like that. We're talking about the history that's being presented in the play, where New York City public schools were taking their students to it for history lessons.
Yeesh.
Right? And how the history in the play was changed. That becomes the bigger issue. That goes back to the thing I always tell my students is when you're watching something historical, you're probably watching it from the mindset and the morals and the social norms of the era it was made in than it's about.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we can change history for director's privilege and who moves the story along. But then that becomes the story, though. And as history teachers, we gotta fight that because, I saw it in the movie, I saw it on TV, I read it on TikTok. Somebody did a TikTok on it. It's John Green and his crash course crap.
Okay. Ooh. And that's the thing.
Fight me, John Green. Let's go.
Shout out.
You know what? He's on the internet so much he will hear this. He will find you.
Good. Bring it.
It's not.
Bring it. I guarantee
it's not John. You got to worry about. It's Hank. So one of the things, especially no matter how ridiculously over the top the movie is, 300. Yeah. 300 is Frank Miller's insane over the top drug fueled dream of what the Battle of Thermopylae was like, and every flipping student asked me the same thing.
We're gonna watch 300?
No. Well, there's that, and then they go, Mr. Scherzer, is there a giant hole in the middle of Sparta? Why would you have a giant hole in the middle of your city?
And what do you think it got there?
Yeah, are they still digging? It's not bottomless pit. I paid you for a bottomless pit.
How do we turn Scottish in Sparta?
That's Gerard Butler. This is Sparta. No, this is Edinburgh.
I also think
Gerard Butler, the Sean Connery of our day. I'm not changing my accent.
Getting back on the topic.
No.
I think something that can determine whether or not you get into the weeds and thematic teaching as well is based on the course you teach and the content you have. So for a course like world history, you're inundating kids with 8,000 years of history at a minimum.
Oh god.
Right?
Yeah.
8,000 years of history that we have to cover in 7.5 months. Whereas maybe something like an AP Euro course,
Just call it what it is. It's what, 36 weeks.
36 weeks. Whereas with an AP Euro class, you're specifically looking at European history. You're looking at a much smaller chunk of the world and and how it's been affected. But so you have a little bit more time to get into the details there. If you were to do something like a Latin American course, Mexican Americans, you can get more into details there based on what you're talking about. That
But you still have a deadline.
You still have a deadline,
Teaching,
yes.
there's still a deadline you have to get to
Correct.
for something. In an AP course, it's the national exam.
But that's what I'm saying. Like
in a
the
regular
course itself
course,
is going to drive
it's the final exam of the semester, or in U.S. history in the state of Texas, it's the EOC.
Right.
So then I would actually argue we've all taught AP courses. I think being an AP teacher would be more difficult with that, especially with a more focused course, because the test is so arbitrary. There are there's very basics guidelines, but like the STAR test, we have a pretty good idea of exactly what's going to be.
We also know that on the AP test, they're not going to ask too many weedy type questions, even on multiple choice.
Well, and it's a different course too, because it's an international test, an international course.
So there's not going to be too many weed type questions.
But are the weeds useful for the essays?
They can be,
but then you got to make sure that story matches up with the prompt, right? So if you inundate them with too many of them, then they start crossing the stories. And it's you can't cross the streams in history. You can't cross the stories and get the facts wrong, because then it just blows up your paper.
And good.
No, good.
So one of the things, Smith, last year you were integral in training up a new guy for world history, Mr. Kemp, and he basically was trying to figure out, because one of the things that Kemp came in with, and the new guy came in today this year, is they've got all the stories locked and loaded. They've got all the stories locked and loaded. Was that true when you started teaching for yourself?
No, I had to stick to themes because I liked history, but I didn't know there are certain parts of in areas that I liked in world history. I like Asian history, I like American history, but like we get into the Middle East and things like that, I had to stick to thematic based teaching, big broad scopes, because that helped me to get through the content. And then I would pick out one or two things to help back up those ideas or that event.
Let me guess, Ottomans?
Ottomans were one. And whenever you get to the end of the year, you're talking about the radicalization, things like that.
Yeah.
You've got Arab-Israeli conflict. And that's going to be a huge thing this year when we get to it. So
that's going to be interesting. Schnetty, you and I had the same mentor, and our mentor had pretty much mastered all of this. Basically.
Yeah, he really had a really good balance.
But when you had him and versus when I had him, that year difference, he got way more into the weeds when I got there. When he was working on the AP part, that was the lawless days of AP, when it was who the hell knew what was going to be on.
No, I remember. I got hired the very year after that, after my student teaching, and within 2 years I was teaching AP, and it was kind of the same thing. Okay, teach it.
Good luck.
We teach AP, teach U.S. history from 1607 to the 1980s. That's what we're going to test.
So then, if we're looking for the best way to help our students, especially with the students that we have nowadays in this current generation, are we better served doing broad strokes? Like, should we even just sort of like start removing the weeds even more? Should it just be broad strokes? Because if you look at test scores, if you look at retention rates, they're barely.
But are we looking at test scores through a standardized test? Are we looking? And I would always argue that with looking at data, right? How genuine are the questions?
How do you mean? What do you mean genuine questions?
Are they legit questions to begin with?
Oh, okay.
Right? Are they? Do they have? What's the overall purpose of what's going on? Does your questions connect up to other questions on the test? Or are you just spitting out questions like you're spitting out facts in the classroom? Right? Because then you're taking this shotgun approach to teaching history, and you're taking this shotgun approach to giving multiple choice questions. Right? you and I kind of do the same thing. The further you get into your AP year, the less and less the multiple choice tests happen in the classroom.
Yeah, it's all
Right?
right.
It's all writing, and you see that with even my Euro kids this year, right? We just took a half writing, half multiple choice test. They did really, really well in the writing part. Some of them are still questionable multiple choice because you can get weedy on multiple choice questions, and then it becomes, well, what are you going to get weedy on to begin with? And the same thing with you're getting a test from an outside source. You're getting a test from somebody that doesn't actually teach the class. So you're getting well, we're giving this to the entire school or the entire district or the entire state or the entire country's taking this test. Well, what the heck are we supposed to know what to cover on? And you put those things in, you give us this guideline, but then again, you can still go 15 different directions with that.
I mean, that's a whole nother show. Is like,
Yeah, but
what do we do to replace the national test, and should we?
Yeah, but
what would have to be in place to
but if you have more thematic style questions, and I believe most people don't know how to write those properly, and I think that becomes the problem.
I have a huge problem with
The weedy questions are easier.
Oh yeah,
right?
It's true or false.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is a binary question.
So, but you
Right
get
or
more
wrong.
those thematic style questions where it's really truly, what are they called? Level 2, level 3 questions. You have whatever it is, right?
Depth of knowledge.
Right. What's the idea here instead of just total recall?
Right, because there's more application to the bigger themes, right?
Yeah.
When you get into a theme, you have to apply. When you get into weeds, it's more like, oh, hey, look, fun fact. Montezuma drank 2 gallons of hot chocolate every day. Thank you, Polar Express, for that. But that's the big difference there. Yeah, well, that's the Polar Express.
According to a movie, yes.
Yeah, according to the movie, yeah.
Oh, it hurt my soul.
But see, that's what I mean. It's like you can get into those little facts and things like that, but is it necessary? Kind of building on that, right? Like, is it necessary to talk about those little things? My thing was just always making sure that the kids had a strong grasp.
And sometimes those weeds is what they cling on to and remember. But the problem is, it might not help them.
They only remember the weeds, though. That's the problem.
They will only remember that Alexander the Great might have been gay. Like, that's it. That's all they'll remember.
Yeah.
So, what should we make then? There,
not that he can't conquered half the known world.
Yeah, and like had brilliant, but not important.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, and once again, that's informed by our values of the modern world.
Yeah.
We're more interested in who he was dating than who he was conquering.
So, do we blame Howard Zinn?
No, because Howard Zinn is a saint. Anyway,
you said that with a straight face.
I do that just to watch his smile fade. So,
That's fancy, actually.
Oh, you can pull. What are you
doing?
What are you messing with?
Why are you killing my phone, dude?
Charges your phone. Never mind. Continue.
Now I've lost my train of. Oh, you did that on purpose. So, what if we started encouraging kids and like had the extra stuff there? So does
that's your enrichment stuff. If you're looking at it from a teaching perspective, that's your enrichment.
Well, then
The extra stuff is your enrichment.
True, but then I hate. Okay, this
He doesn't want to lose it when he's teaching. Is what he's trying to figure out.
Right.
And I don't blame him because the stories are good, right? The stories are good. The stories are fun. They keep the teacher interested. They keep the students interested. But if you have too many,
there's a balance. It's the balance
again.
Right?
And maybe I have this issue because there's a deadline coming.
Yeah.
You have to be at a certain point. When you guys know this as an AP teacher, you know where you need to be at Christmas break.
Yes.
In Euro, Napoleon needs to be dead. If he's dead at Christmas, I'm good for the spring semester.
And Merry Christmas.
Right?
Merry Christmas, Napoleon.
Well, and to that point,
if we kill Napoleon when we get back after Thanksgiving, and Metternich comes in and says, "This is what we're doing throughout Europe," right? We're going to clean everything up, and we'll have the conservative orders coming back. We're set, right? Everybody's got that spot.
To that same point, let's look at it from a paper perspective, right? Let's use that as maybe our analogy. An essay, okay? An AP essay, for example, you get your topic sentence. There's your theme for that paragraph. Mm-hmm. You don't want to inundate it with too many facts because you're going to lose sight of the rest of the paper that you have to do.
It's the shotgun blast problem.
Correct.
But you need enough.
You need 2 to 3 pieces of evidence, and you're good to go. Those are your 2 to 3 stories. You move on to the next one.
You need burst fire.
There you go.
Yeah, you need 2 to 3 per body paragraph. I teach mine 3, right? Just in case you get one wrong.
But that's the thought. So you have the big picture, and that's just that just grows as well, right? If you look at it from the whole paper scope, your thesis statement is your topic. That is your theme. That is the thematic teaching. This is the theme of that paper. Now here is topic 1, topic 2, topic 3.
Yeah.
And then within each of those topics, evidence or story 1, evidence or story 2, evidence or story 3.
So yeah, and I've been trying to do more of that this year, even with especially with my on level kids, because what I've tried to do is not just do the question of how did the Ottomans come to power? That's today's lesson. The bigger question that I have that I'm going to connect over several different units is what do we do when we're successful? And that's the life lesson they can draw from that as well. What do you do when you're successful? What did the Mongols do when they were successful? They
And that's the historical pattern.
Yeah.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And then there's what do we do when we're successful? You look at that and it's that's a bad example.
Okay, do you think if we actually take the question part of it, right, where we talk about what, who, why, and we use more of the uh, directive terms, evaluate, analyze, describe, where you have to think a little bit more, right?
Mhm.
Because when you see what, you can come up with 1 or 2 words and get that answer. But if somebody tells you we're gonna be able to describe the Ottomans' approach to whatever, right?
Yeah.
Not what was the Ottomans' approach, but describe it a little bit,
Mhm.
right? Where describe is better than identify, because identify is 1 or 2 words. Describe means you got to have a little bit of detail, and you got a little bit either of what's going to happen or what happened right before that. And so if we take the question out of the question and turn it into more of a prompting, right? That directive term, right? You're being told what we're going to do. We're not asking you to something. We're telling you we want you to describe this, right?
Mhm.
You're being told what to write. And I think when we get away from like questions that require like 1 or 2 answers, we're fine. And then I think that helps with that brings in the stories better and connecting it up to the theme at the same time. Because now you're not just spitting facts to spit facts. Now you're spitting facts that have a analysis behind it or an evaluation behind it or a description behind it that you can tie into the theme, or you can get the students to tie in to the themes. Hey, what are we talking about here, right?
Yeah. Well, multiple choice is the worst thing that ever happened
Yeah.
in history class.
Yeah.
Multiple choice, the way we test um, hurts us either way. And it disincentivizes either thematic teaching or
Multiple choice is an easy way to test information to a large group of people, right?
I would argue I would rather have for my on level kids 6 short answer questions, no more than 2 or 3 sentences each, no more.
No more. And so, or you can do like the bullet responses where they don't have to form sentences as long as they got the
Yeah.
because that's what they're going to anyways, right? The AP even has the instructions that bullets are not acceptable because they know schools are allowing that to happen.
But
right? And for a regulars class, that might be perfectly fine, right?
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we got this. This leads to another several bigger problems. How do we fix testing in the educational system? How do we fix pacing in the educational system?
I think it's the multiple choice that brings in the weeds, right? Because those weeds, well, I want to tell a cool story. I'm going to tell this cool because again, I think there's a small group of people that might be able to write really decent thematic multiple choice questions, but it's easier to write,
Weeds questions.
who defeated Napoleon at Waterloo, right?
George Washington.
George flippin' Washington.
That was Simon Bolivar. Sure.
Toussaint Pacher.
All 3 of them. It was the
Phil of the
triumvirate.
Hunt.
The original Avengers.
Phil of the Hunt. Oh,
The original Avengers. So okay, round the horn. Wrap this up because I got.
baseball.
Is that where that came from?
It's a sports. It's a
I
sports
thought,
show.
I thought round the horn was the whole Africa thing. Am I wrong? What's the story?
What is he talking about?
You send the ball around the horn.
Oh, you're talking about the good Cape of Good Hope? That
No, the
horn?
Horn of Africa, Somalia, that area.
Oh, that
That's the
area.
Horn of
Okay.
Africa.
Okay.
Yes, I'm the crazy.
Maybe if somebody's listening, somebody need to teach geography at one point.
Oh, Scherzer did.
Come.
teach geography. Of course, the year that Scherzer taught geography, the world shut down. So if you do that again, the world might shut down. There's a clear.
Oh,
So really quick, what? Give me a because we have to have numbers. What percentage weeds versus what percentage theme?
Is good or what we do?
is good,
Okay.
in your opinion? Smith?
I'm stuck in between 70-30 and 80-20. So I'm going to go right in between. I'm going to say 75% theme. No, I'm going to go 80. 80% theme, 20% story.
Fair enough.
You ready for a shock? I was going to go 70-30
Yes.
before you even gave us numbers.
Shocking.
30%, 70% theme, 30% weeds.
All right, so where I'm going to be.
Oh yeah, you're going to flip our numbers.
No, I'm going to do 60% theme, 40% story. I have recently, when my son became interested in World War One and started because of Battlefield One and started asking me like individual questions about the bullets used in the guns. I'm like, we're going to stop this right now, and we're going to focus on because then
Too weedy.
that was the thing. I was like, I don't know, man, but I'm sure you can look it up. And he was like, well, then who started World War One? I was like,
That we can talk about.
now I will take you out for ice cream to answer this question. And he's he's asking questions to go eat ice cream. So,
And what's wrong with that?
no, I'm just very proud that it took me to
I'll ask questions if it gets me pizza and ice cream.
That's true. Oh, I want to do that. We should have pizza and ice cream. So, but they both have their place, though. In the end, they both have their
place.
Yes, in the end, they both have
Not
their
with
place.
my reflux.
I think there's several different things that involve it. And I think one of the biggest things. Well, okay, so the two things: you have your deadline,
Yeah.
right? What does your time look like? Where are you at in your content? Number two, or I mean, and even you could even get to that point, like how much time do you have in your class?
45 minutes versus an hour and a half is a totally different.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Totally different scenario.
Again, the content of the course can drive it as well. If I'm talking just about Europe, okay, I have a little bit more time, and the content probably asks for me to talk more. Like we don't really talk about like the religious wars in particular in world history, but in AP Euro, you talk more specifically about the religious wars in Europe.
And how it becomes like more, it changes when you teach it.
Correct. And so again, the course and the amount of time that you have are going to drive what you can do in terms of theme versus weeds. Maybe even skill level too. If I'm teaching a bunch of freshmen or eighth graders, I'm probably going more theme.
Does one actually teach freshmen or rein them in?
Both. It's a little bit of both. So, sometimes you can actually teach them. Other times it's herding cats.
But yeah, so you have a couple of those variables.
The other thing is, how good are your resources?
Whoa, we've given away textbooks.
Yeah,
No, we have an online textbook.
If you have good
access to an online textbook.
If you have some courses have access to an online textbook,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some courses, the book and any other outside resources you give good weeds, right? Give that good information, right? And then you as the teacher can then
Connect.
Thematically that stuff up, especially if you have an engaging class. It's going to ask about some things that they've read in the book, or they looked at what you posted for them on online or in the LMS, right? Then you do that. But if you don't have a really good, valuable resource or something that you trust or something that's not just shotgun together to act as I don't know, a 6-7 week review before a national exam that your school is passing off as a textbook, you're going to lose that idea of being able to thematic approach because the book itself is not set up in a way that if you have a good book, it's set up in a way that you can that leads to those themes happening as well. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm good. I think I'm pretty set. I think I know I need to change and apply more thematic teaching, and I need to be more. As you guys talked about, enrichment is the dessert, and I've been doing too much dessert, and I need to, in real life and in teaching, weird, and I need to tone that down. So I can talk about enrichment later as a thing, but all right. So where do I start?
In terms of teaching theme versus
where do I start if I want to reconvert and change and what's my next steps?
See, if I don't have something that guides me, I can tend to get into weeds sometimes. So for me, it was always making sure my PowerPoint was set up ready to go, making sure my PowerPoint wasn't too wordy, making sure my PowerPoint focused on what needed to be taught, and then depending on where I was at in time, maybe okay, and how engaged the kids are, like okay, maybe I can shoot in a little fun fact here about something or another.
Yeah.
So that was always my thing. Is the whatever I'm reading from or getting my notes from had to be, because otherwise I'll get off track.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've only taught world history at a regular level, so I haven't done it at AP.
What do you mean you taught AP Euro in that world history?
No, it's European history.
Ooh,
And it's global
Jim's
studies,
spotting words.
according to some universities out there.
Yeah.
So, but if you have, like, I don't know how it would work in world history, but Euro, AP, US, minority rights could be a thing you touch on all the time, right? Women's issues touch on all the time, right? Even
Oh, okay, yeah, I see where you're going with that. So
those are the themes that I'm talking about. Right?
yes. So
But I
yes.
don't know how it would connect up overall, let's say in an AP world class, because you can look at an AP class, remember, as a survey course. You can talk about whatever you want to, right?
Yeah.
So if you got your ideas, okay, these are kind of the themes I want to carry out throughout the year because these are the things they like to ask about on the essays and on the DBQs, right? So those things get mentioned, and then you can get those stories that revolve around those ideas.
So I think that's a really good point to bring up is what are your themes? Let's consider that. What are we considering a theme versus what are we considering an event? Revolutions, event or theme versus something like politics or like politics, right? What is the P?
Yeah, but even like in Europe, you could talk about all the political changes that happened starting in the 1600s, and they go through.
That's what I'm saying.
Go through almost the start of the 21st century, right?
Yeah, but so
And all these different changes that happened either on the island or on the continent, right?
Stereo. That all these was in stereo. You
But
guys
that's
are
what I'm
talking
saying, right?
too much.
You have the because that's what you have in the AP courses, right? In AP World, you have what is it, spice tea, right? You have all those.
Yeah, what would be the AP Europe or the AP World?
World.
Excuse me.
You have
Maybe world
social,
themes.
political.
Well, that's too broad.
That's
We're
too broad,
talking
yeah,
about.
But those are still themes.
they're
That's
still
what I'm saying. So what are we determining as themes?
Oh man, so I'd have to
Thematic
say,
teaching. How broad are we getting?
I think the problem is you start bigger so you can always focus in more. It's like thematic themes would be movement of people, right? That's a theme is a movement of people.
Mhm.
However, you can subdivide that, like you said, like in your notes, with movement of people due to war or plague or
Yeah.
economy or trade or whatever it is like that.
with Euro, you can just make wars a common theme throughout the entire course because
We can make war a common theme.
yeah,
And then you talk
And
about
then
the
all the
different.
things
But then again, we've also got the bigger, more moral, because we're as social studies teachers, we are also compelled to teach the morality of our culture. Once again, the thing that you and I talk about all the time: freedom versus security.
Yeah.
I mean, because you can put that in as well.
Mhm.
So it's about, I guess, the first step is defining your themes. You're right. Is it freedom versus security, or is it wars and their
and
complications?
if you have that in your head before the school year starts, right? Hey, these are the things that I kind of want to drive throughout the year. You're driving the bus, Gus. You can do what you want with it, right? You just make sure that you touch on those things, and the kids will catch on to it.
Right.
Right. Hey,
So
coach, we haven't talked about women yet. What's going on here, right? We haven't talked about in American history. We haven't talked about Black Americans. Well, what's going on in here, right? They eventually start expecting those things to pop up in your class discussions.
Mhm.
If you're doing it right, they should be asking, "Where's this missing piece
Yes.
that we usually cover?" If they're not, maybe you haven't covered it as thoroughly as you thought.
Well, and Shinade, I've always like one of the first years or two that I was teaching, you told me something that really always stuck with me, and that was the barbed wire fence approach. Can you explain that?
I already did.
You already
I
did.
got it figured
Okay.
out here, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So,
So that idea of the post is your theme.
The post is the era.
The post is in between the post is the era.
Yeah.
The post. Yeah. Okay.
With
Okay.
the post starts where one era starts.
And then the lines are your theme,
Themes.
and then the barbs are those specific events in the theme. So I've always loved that idea and that concept because it simplifies it so much. You're only going to have so many themes throughout history, right? And that's why I
Compliments
asked.
of Jim Smith,
Tim
by the
Smith.
way.
Yep.
25 plus years ago, when I first got into AP,
Mhm.
he kind of explained that out to me, and it just clicked at that moment. Like that makes a heck of a lot better sense than trying to shotgun facts all over the place and
Mhm.
display my knowledge and how great I am at knowing all this stuff. And you'll never be as good as me. And good luck on your test. No, let's get this theme and walk them through it together.
Mhm. And there's only so many themes that are going to be on that post, right?
Mhm.
So again, it comes back to that question. Well, what are your themes? Are processes of themes? Are is like so again? That's where now I'm maybe getting a little into weeds on theme. Haha. But so yeah, what is a theme? What are you defining as your theme? Can a process be a theme? Things like that, you know. So like politics. That's one of the spice tea, one of the themes of AP World, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the big things. So you talk about politics and every era you go through, the political changes, the political norms, right? And then within that is your processes and your events that continue to happen where you get your stories. But yeah, what is your theme?
It's one of those things where you sit there and you've taught it for so long, and it worked with a certain group of kids. But I think the barbed wire fence approach really does seem to be sort of a catch-all of this can work for everyone.
Correct.
And you're going to have those kids that come up and asking curiosity and stuff like that, and they're going to be the ones that.
And you cultivate
you
those
cultivate the curiosity.
hey, why don't you look this up? Why don't you figure it out and then tell us about it, right? You give them that chance to go out there and express, hey, this is
So
that idea.
I got this new guy on my team this year. I think what I'm going to do for next quarter is I'm going to give him the analogy of the barbed wire fence, and he and I are going to sit down. This is going to be as much learning for me as for him, and we're going to barbed wire fence out the next unit, and we're just going to practice that because I think I've been doing it too long in my own way, and I think I could definitely use a refresh. I think it's always good to always come back and sit there and say, okay, am I doing this the best way now? I'm doing it the best way for kids in a different district 10 years ago. But am I doing it the best way now? So I think that's what I'm going to do. And getting someone new with a new perspective would help me see it better. Final thoughts, gentlemen? Because I want to go home because it's break time.
We covered it. Yep.
No, I think that's all I've got. Yeah.
All right.
So
this was filmed in front of a live studio audience.
Yeah. Oh.
Of what?
Audience.
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 So if you're thinking about teaching, once again, see a therapist. There's something clearly wrong with you. And then secondly, consider what and where and how you're teaching and why you're teaching it.
Or just do like some do, teach 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years, and then get out of the classroom and go to administration.
Yeah, but
only to help teachers.
No. It's all that blah blah blah, comma, sir.
Sir. Yes. Sir. All right, audience, y'all.